What's up, everybody? Brett here, back today casting some more Total War Warhammer 2 multiplayer mayhem. This time we're going to be following my buddy David, the White Lizard. Thanks, David, for sending in your replay to the Discord channel. I appreciate it. And he titled this for me, The Troll Tide. And you can already see he's got a lot of the newer additions to the Greenskin Army. Let's go ahead and slow-mo this. There's a lot of tactical stuff I want to talk about, especially in regards to a 2v2. Before we get into that, we should definitely go over army compositions quickly. We've got some Boar Cav out on the flanks. I love these guys since the changes. They're much beefier, and they're much more worth their cost than they used to be. We've got a front line of Savage Orcs. Hard-hitting, cheap, relatively. And if they get in amongst low-tier Dwarf units or Empire units, they can do great damage. We've got the Rusty Heirs. I think that's their only range on this side. It sure is. And if you protect them, you know, they can get you a lot of value over the course of a long game, but they're also kind of a juicy target. They have stalk, so they'll usually make it to their target, but then if they get focused down, you know, it's a decent investment. I think they're 600 gold. You got the 8 Peak Loonies here, the Fanatics. They're pretty sweet, 100 leadership. And then in the back, this is where all the money went, right? We've got Grimgor. He's got all of his abilities. I feel like I'm jumping around a little bit, but that's okay. Let's look at Grimgor, the biggest and the baddest. Almost need to pause this because the battle's going to be underway so quickly. He's got best of the best. You know what? Let's actually pause it just because there's so many new abilities, especially even just on Grimgor, that we need to talk about. Best of the best, 30 meter range, 10 melee defense, and 11 damage resistance. Very good. As long as someone's near him, he gets these bonuses. Makes him a better duelist. Get back here, we all are aware of. Your next is a powerful debuff. Minus 24 melee attack, minus 48 speed, so you can't even run away from him. 48% speed, that is. And then minus 40 melee defense. So you pop, best of the best is popped. Your next you use on the enemy, and then you pop Gitsnick for bonus 24 melee attack and plus 50% armor-piercing weapon damage, and Bloodforged armor. So Grimgor's way kitted out right now. He'll get 30 bonus armor. This is an explosion, does a little bit of magic damage, not super relevant, especially against the dwarves. But it will get him out of a tight spot if he finds himself surrounded by infantry. For his magic, he took an Orc Shaman, brought Brain Burster, and here we go. So bonus melee attack and a little bit of damage here for a pretty cheap spell. And that's going to be very effective for him. But as I was trying to say before I interrupted myself, the real core here is going to be the trolls. 2 groups of stone trolls, very tanky regeneration, of course. Much tankier than your standard troll. And then the river trolls, who are an addition that I kind of rarely see whenever I watch multiplayer. Some people really respect these guys and some people don't. For me, like bang for my buck, I would probably go with the stone trolls depending on which faction I'm facing. But in a blind pick for sheer value, I would stick with them. They have their AoE Overwhelming Odor, which lowers melee attack. So spreading them out through your front line can really help you win an engagement that might have been otherwise close. Whereas the Swamp Things, these guys have, you know, they do their poison damage, which is, you know, sort of what separates them from your regular trolls, as well as causing terror, which is different for them as well. So the other trolls, they cause fear, but not terror. And this other army, this other Greenskin army, is much more wide, let's say. They went with trolls here, which are very expensive and don't pack the same kind of numbers. We can slow-mo it. Watch these Hellstorm rocket batteries slowly come in. But their front line's made up of Night Goblins. Cheap, we got the 8 Peak Loonies here. We've got Night Goblin Heirs in the back, another group of Rusty Heirs. So you got lots of poison. And yeah, just the ability to go wide. And they're going to match up very well versus the Flagellants, Sigmar's Son, cheap spearmen front line that the Empire has brought. We've got some nasty skulkers in the back, perhaps to protect against any type of, you know, Karl Franz type shenanigans. Karl Franz likes to jump in, then boom, nasty skulkers out of nowhere with their stalk mechanic and their slowing and their smoke bombs. They can drag you down. They do not do poison damage. If they had that, they would be almost impossible to get away from. And then he kept his heavier hitters in the back, which I think was a good strategy. 2 Savage Orcs and the Crimson Killers, the elite of the elite when it comes to Black Orc tech. It's like, why have one weapon when you could have 2 weapons? It's like genius. And then out on the flanks, you've got Forest Goblin Spider Riders. I like that, especially paired with Squig Herds, who do the damage. They're anti-infantry, they're armor piercing, and then the Forest Goblin Spider Riders are there, in my mind, when I use them, They're going to absorb the little bit of missile fire that's going to try to stop you from getting in. They're going to poison whatever's trying to run away, and then boom, the Squig Herd hits and does all the actual damage. He's also got some trolls. One group of river trolls I could see being very valuable for the same reason I said before. That odor giving you those debuffs in the front line. And then Wurzag here with just all the spells. We don't really need to go over all of them. We'll call them out as we see them. But the big thing being the Effigy of the Git, keeping enemies from running away. And then I know he's got the Foot of Gork. We'll be watching out for that, as well as the Bonewood Staff and Squiggly Beast, making sure he's got all the Winds of Magic he needs to cast. So the dwarf front line right now is 4, I think it's just 4 standard Rangers. Yep. And they are Vanguard deployed. I don't know if they're actually Vanguard deployed, but they're definitely deployed in front of their army in such a way that they can take a couple shots. The dwarf player is posturing so that he can shoot, retreat with the Rangers, pull them back behind. These are actually standard Longbeard, so a very resilient front line. Ekron Miners, I kind of like this positioning on the flank with the Miners with blasting charges, because a lot of times you use these dudes to catch the initial charge. They're Longbeards, they have charge defense against large, which is actually going to be pretty decent at negating the charge of the Stone Trolls. And then down the flanks, you would throw your blasting charges, but unfortunately, a seasoned player who knows how to use trolls and who knows how to play against this type of play will just send your large units, send your trolls into the miners. They waste their charges that don't do any damage versus the trolls, even though they are fire damage, and trolls are weak against that. But the point remains, they're not good at taking out entities like that. They'd much rather throw their charges against these savage orcs. We've got the Goblobber here, Regiment of Renown. Unfortunately, it's deployed too close. They have this little awkward hill here, so he tried to get in on this hill that makes sure he had vision. I would still have deployed further back if it was me. And then you've got Gromriddle the White Dwarf, great pick in a 2v2 situation because of his Gromriddle has no fear, which gives your entire army and your allies' army unbreakable, which you can already kind of start to imagine how that would be useful when you have this many units on the field. It could really swing the tide of battle if used at the right point. And then you, of course, have these Slayers going to protect the artillery pieces, while these Gyrocopters, 2 groups here. I could have sworn there was something else. Was it just 2 Gyrocopters? I thought there was a Gyro Bomber on this field. There is. He's way in the back. It's the actual Skyhammer. Hell yeah, let's try and watch him this battle to see if he actually gets any value. It's an expensive unit. It's a real investment. And before I lose my voice trying to talk this fast for this long, we've got the Deathjack Archers out here, Vanguard deployed. They're not getting any value. They're not shooting. I don't know what the deal is with that. They should be shooting at something if they're going to be shooting at all. I really hate the way the Empire player has deployed. His basics are okay. He's got his artillery in the back. He's got his archers behind his front line, right? That's the super basics. But the reality is he deployed in blocks, which is terrible. You want to deploy in as long of lines as possible. There are very few instances where a block formation is preferable, mainly if you're just using something like handgunners that aren't contested, and you need them to have the ability to have a tighter turning radius to respond to attacks. Other than that, there's really no reason to ever deploy in these types of formations. All you're doing is you're leaving big gaps, which also I will say, if you have handgunners, you leave gaps for them to fire through because they don't have the same arc as a crossbow or a standard archer. So you can leave gaps for that. So that's another reason to do that. However, there's none of that on the field. Strongest units we'll just go over for the Empire. 2 groups of Hellstorm rocket batteries focused on Crimson Killers, and they're keeping them off the battlefield, but they're not going to get their value. They're very expensive, and they're not going to make that money back. Demigryph Knights with Halberds, that's a big deal. And then we've got the Bright Wizards, who's probably going to make the most impact on this battle with only 1 spell, the Burning Head. And then Volkmar the Grim with his power mustache, chilling on his pimp cart, and he is fully kitted out. He's got Banishment, he's got Divine Power, increasing the miscast chance of the opposing armies, and Grand Hammer, Grand Shield of Faith, and then the Grand Soulfire. So without any further ado, guys, let's get into it. My first criticism of the Empire Dwarf Alliance is that they should have deployed together. They should have combined their melee forces to make a strong and durable front line, probably deploy in the center to give themselves maximum line of sight, and that way they could share the responsibility of protecting their heavy investments of double Hellstorm rocket battery and Goblobber, as well as all of these range tools. The front line here has been engaged. There's some dropped orders, it looks like. Some units not quite fighting yet. But the Hellstorm rocket batteries deployed so close to the front line, so to the Goblobber, that, I mean, these archers can just walk right up to them and shoot them. And that should really never be the case. Volkmar is taking huge amounts of fire. He's being focused. A nice banishment and a burning head coming off from the Empire player. That banishment is going to nuke the Rusty Heirs. That burning head looks like it took away the nasty skulkers and these night goblins from the front line, allowing the flagellants to get in. But lo and behold, this flanking maneuver is coming in. 4 groups of cav. He's trying to protect with the Demigryph Knights, and yeah, that crossbow unit got absolutely dumpstered. The problem from the dwarves is they deployed everything too close together. Their rangers, their artillery, all right behind the front line, and what do stone trolls do? Especially with Wa active, Jesus Christ, look at their stats. They are going to charge and break right through your front line. They might not do a lot of damage on the charge to Longbeards, but then they can still push forward into the back. They can push their models through, and now you've got all your rangers shut down. Grommadil's not actually fighting anybody. Your gyrocopters, who would love to be effective, probably the best thing they could do to be effective would just be to chase off trolls and not let them come back. One of the Hellstorm rocket batteries has been compromised. These crossbowmen are gone. You know, the Demigryph Knights are going to be in their element. There's really not much to stop them. As long as they are used wisely, they will do a lot of work. But Volkmar the Grim is... he's getting crushed. He's taking, like, non-stop Night Goblin Archer fire, so he's going to remain poisoned. He's got all of his buffs. Hopefully he's been cycling in this battle to help him win in the pit. Empire Knights fighting nasty skulkers. Not a fight they want when it's not on the charge. And get back here, Pop. Lots of leadership. These goblins, these squigs, they're not going anywhere. And Volkmar is going down. Bright Wizard, unfortunately, only took 1 spell, and it's a spell that I probably wouldn't even have taken. I would have gone with something else. Something perhaps even a little bit cheaper that lands more often. When you're fighting the greenskins, you expect an infantry blob. Piercing bolts, not... is that the name of the spell? I haven't played with a Fire Wizard in a while. But they have some spells that are more reliable than the Burning Head, and that are cheaper too. And you can get a lot more kills that way. Trolls returning from route, and it's turning into 2 separate fights, and that's kind of part of my criticism for the deployment of the dwarves in the Empire. They really needed another big foot of Gork there. Probably trying to stomp out these Demigryph Knights, who are currently unbreakable with the rest of the Dwarfen Empire army, thanks to Grommadil. But Grimgor's in here. Here we go, has been used by his shaman. And one thing that I noticed the first time I watched this replay was that David was helping his buddy. He was actually using his Orc Shaman to cast spells on this side of the battlefield to help them win, which is great teamwork. The Sky Hammer's dropping its payload. Unfortunately, there's really not a lot of infantry here. It's dropping its payload on trolls. Trolls and cav. It really wants to drop them on infantry blobs, and it's going to do work. I personally like the Sky Hammer as a pick here, but you just have to be really tactical with it. But I'll say this. Had the Empire and Dwarves positions been reversed, I think the Empire player was better equipped to deal with the trolls than the Dwarf player. The Dwarf player was better equipped to deal with the massive infantry rush and flanking that the Goblin-centric army was putting up. So, a little bit of a reversal there, but as I've said before, twice now, they should have deployed together. They should have focused on protecting their artillery, which was a massive investment, and keeping their lords safe, especially Volkmar, who's such a large target. You have to be very mobile with him, or you have to shut down what's threatening him. And those goblin archers were allowed to just sit and shoot for the entire battle. And you've got all these flagellants and unbreakable units here, like Sigmar's Sons, who can get their value if they're fighting the right units. I love that they're chasing down these Crimson Killers. Look at these shirtless, these brave and shirtless men. And they're going to fight to the last because, of course, they're unbreakable. Wurzag's just squealing around on his pig with his little buddy on his back. I don't know how many people have ever actually taken a look at his model. It's so funny. Used to be a goblin, now he's a squig, and he just kind of keeps him. But that's all she wrote, guys. We can just fast forward here and watch the last of the flagellants and Sigmar's Sons get wrecked. So what I saw was great strategy from the Greenskins. it favored them to deploy separately because they had the desire and the ability to do flanking stuff. Between them, they had 6 units of cav. They had, lots of disruptive magic. And they had the trolls, who, whenever I see big monstrous units and I see lots of cav, what I'm thinking is they want to break through the front line, flank around the front line, and shut down artillery and range stuff. And that's what you need to expect to come up against whenever you're fighting races like the Empire and the Dwarves. That's what they want to do. They want to kill you at ranged. They want to use their durable troops, like Flagellants, like Longbeards, to hold you back, while the Rangers, the Gyrocopters, all that stuff actually does the damage. I mean, these Hellstorm rocket batteries, trying to think what races I would take Hellstorm rocket batteries against. I would take them versus Dwarves. I would take them versus Chaos and Beastmen. And that, I'm not going to say that's it, but like, I could definitely see them being okay versus other races. Greenskins, they could be okay against, depending on the composition. But as we saw here, Warp Driver, almost his entire army was invisible. Let's see, invisible, 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 all these guys invisible. Like half his army wasn't even visible, and they're the targets. They're the tightly, densely packed infantry units that the Hellstorm battery wants to shoot at. Now, they did keep the Crimson Killers back, so you could argue that some of these kills are on high-value targets. But honestly, they didn't get their value. You could have... look at the Demigryph Knights with halberds. They sort of speak for themselves. It's easy to say in hindsight what you should have done. I would not ever bring 2 of these. I think it's too much in this matchup. Maybe go 1 Hellstorm, or even better, guys, Mortars. Mortars are like the unsung heroes of the Empire roster. Take 2 Mortars, and for the amount of money you just saved, you could have got another Empire Knights, right? And those Mortars, I guarantee you would have gotten like 50, 60, 80... who knows how many kills, and then you would have had another unit of cav that you could have thrown to their defense. So you got to think like that. And of course, who knows what this player, the Lost One, was trying to do. Maybe he was trying to test a new build. You never know. But I had the feeling that he's a newer player based on his formations and his deployment. And then I thought Yeet Machine did fine. I will say this. If you're going to deploy your ranged units ahead of your main army, you want to do it against a faction that doesn't have cav or isn't known for cav, because there's a good chance they'll get shut down. And when you pull them back, you need to push your front line forward and you need to pull them back instead of just pulling them back, because there's a weird collision thing that happens in this game. There is, it takes twice as long to get them through, and before you know it, as we saw, their Rangers were basically just standing right behind the front line, and when the front line collapsed, so did they. For a group of Slayers to only get 3 kills, that's a massive grudgeon. And then I thought the Troll play was excellent. They got all their value. They were able to focus down the Swamp Things pretty well. But maybe that was the Slayers. I might have missed a Slayer on Swamp Things battle. But Grimgor I thought did great as well. We didn't get a chance to see it too much, but he was just cycling his abilities over and over again while casting his buffs from his Orc Shaman. And I thought he did a great job with that. So once again, thanks David for sending this in. Thanks to Warp Driver, the Lost One, and Yeet Machine for playing a great game. Guys, if you're interested in sending a replay to the channel, it's Goodtalk Gaming. You can find me on Discord. We have a pretty cool Discord channel with several people that use it on a regular basis. So it's not an empty place. If you want to find someone to play Total War with, they have people there who can show you the ropes, like David, who is a pretty good player. So without any further ado, y'all, thank you so much for watching. My name is Brett. My channel is Goodtalk Gaming, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Later, guys.